Sports Talk Chicago. Here with Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's covered basketball for 13 years and today serves as an NBA reporter for USA Today. Please welcome Mark Medina to the program. Mark, it's great to have you on. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. It's always good to talk with you. Hope you're hanging in there.
So, Mark, what was your reaction to the Bucks win?
Well, it was one hell of a series to watch, and I think that there's a lot of things that came full circle with the Bucks finally tasting its first championship since 1971, and most recently getting through that playoff wall after falling short in the Eastern Conference Finals for 2 consecutive years, and then Giannis elevating his game to another level into a Finals MVP performance. And I think people, for the most part, appreciate Giannis's greatness even before this. But there was a rite of passage that he went through where he was always dominant in the regular season. He would face a playoff opponent that had more time to scheme and make things difficult, and he was able to have a plan B this time around. So it was really cool to see that. And I think on top of that, it was cool to see some new faces in the NBA Finals. Overall, after being used to LeBron dominate that landscape, it was fun to see some other stars shine in the limelight.
Has Giannis become the best player in basketball after this win?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you could make a debate, but I would pin right now Kevin Durant as being the better player and Giannis being number two. And that's not to short shrift Giannis at all. I think it's just more of where Kevin Durant's at in his career. He's still in his prime. Even when he was coming off his Achilles injury, he hasn't really allowed his game to drop off. And, a lot of the Nets' shortcomings had to do with the fact that you have James Harden and Kyrie Irving injured or limited, and the Bucks were a great team. But as much as Giannis was really dominant, to the Bucks' credit, they elevated their game with having better and more reliable, supporting cast teammates. Where I think it's particularly toward the end with the Nets, the burden solely squared on Kevin Durant. But you can certainly make a case for either. But I would give the edge to Kevin because of his overall game, with just how dominant of a scorer he is on all ends of the floor. Giannis has obviously a bigger advantage in terms of his strength and athleticism. But I think the scary thing about Giannis is he's just getting started at age 26, and he already has shown some progress this season and chipping away at some of his relative weaknesses with expanding his outside shot, improving his free throws, and I'm sure he'll continue to build on that next season.
Do you expect Giannis to win more NBA titles and this team?
I certainly expect he will. Now, does that mean that the Bucks are going to repeat next season? As of now, I don't put them as the favorites to repeat because you have to presume that the Nets are going to be healthier. I suspect that because of their shortcomings in the playoffs against Milwaukee, they will do what they can to make sure that the team is just not overly reliant on their big three, that there are some reinforcements in case, heaven forbid, there are some injuries. But I think next season they're going to come in with a clean bill of health. And then you also have a lot of other contenders in the mix that will be jockeying. I suspect that Ben Simmons will be traded from Philadelphia, so they will, get something in value in return there to make them more dangerous. I think on the West, you look at the Lakers, the Nuggets, the Warriors, they're going to be a lot healthier as teams. So it's going to be a tough road to repeat, but in the totality of Giannis's career, he's certainly going to be collecting more titles, more MVPs. And it's also not out of the realm of possibility that he could win next season because that's just how the NBA season unfolds with a lot of unpredictable events. But I think going into the year, I would give the edge to the Nets and the Lakers of getting the title.
Mark, how impressive was it, though, that this Bucks team wasn't necessarily a super team and they still won the finals?
Yeah, it was really impressive. And I think that they fell in this category where they weren't this super team like the Nets. But, look, it wasn't like it was Giannis carrying a bunch of scrubs, right? They had, Chris Middleton, who's a good all-star, Drew Holiday is one of the best defenders in the league. PJ Tucker showed his value in a midseason trade on the defensive end as well. So I think it was a healthy mix of, you obviously have this predominant generational talent in Giannis. You have, a second tier all-star in Chris Middleton, and then a lot of good players that are really good at what they do. And it made for a really good combination to play winning basketball.
Could that become more common in the future? Maybe a shift away from super teams and more so a big superstar, a B superstar, than some good role players?
Yeah, I think it's all just going to vary on the team's circumstances. And, when the bottom line is the star player drives the ship. And so it really just depends on what that player is looking for and then what they have from a cap perspective to work with. But I think that, aside from the Brooklyn Nets, in recent years, you started seeing a shift of the big three to the big two, where you have, Anthony Davis and LeBron James. With the Clippers, you have Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. And so I think that there's less, possible philosophical tension of how do you share one ball with three guys, and you find a bunch of different role players. So I think overall in the league that has shifted already, even before the Bucks. But I think with the small market parameters, this is really the model that you find it's hard to find Giannis out of nowhere. He's a unique talent, but like generally speaking, you have a star player that drives the ship, and if you can find an all-star caliber player that isn't quite at the same level as far as generational talent, that at least gives him some complementary scoring, and then the rest role players. I think that's a great recipe, so long as the coaching and the overall culture is in place.
Mark Medina here on Sports Talk Chicago. Mark, how do you evaluate the Suns' performance in the series?
Well, the bottom line is they came up short for the most part because Giannis is really dominant. They really had no answer for him other than fouling him and sending him into the free throw line. And even that in game 6 was a bad proposition because he was making his free throws. But I think when you're looking internally, even when you account for Giannis's dominance, there were a handful of all their losses, with the exception of game 3, came down to just a handful of possessions here or there where they could have won the game. But they had turnovers, they had offensive rebounds, they didn't have consistent ball movement. And so with where I look at this, it's kind of a glass half full, glass half empty. They overachieved. I didn't expect that they would get to the finals. I thought they would lose in the first round. Part of it had to do with the circumstances, with who they faced, with a limited Anthony Davis with the Lakers, an injured Jamal Murray with the Nuggets, an injured Kawhi Leonard with the Clippers. But in fairness to them, Chris Paul stayed healthy. He had an impact where he's still putting up performances like he's in his prime. And Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton raised their game to another level. Devin Booker not just being a guy that stuffs the stat sheet, but also impacts winning basketball. DeAndre Ayton becoming more of a defensive force and still being able to have a presence offensively, even if his shots are limited, to account for Chris Paul's arrival. But clearly they have to put all those things consistently together against a high playoff caliber team, because you saw games where Devin Booker was scoring a lot, sometimes inefficiently, sometimes efficiently, but at the expense of consistent ball movement. And then he had DeAndre Ayton getting into foul trouble a few games. So I think moving forward, they are young. The future is bright for them to build off of this, but the championship window is always fleeting. So to the earlier question about, the Bucks, can they win a championship next season? I think it applies the same way to the Suns. I wouldn't give them the edge to get back to the finals because the landscape is going to be a lot tougher next season. But they do have a base to build on, and I trust that just like Giannis, Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton will end their career with championships. With Chris Paul, who knows? I expect that he will stay with the Suns, whether he, exercises player option or gets a longer deal with the Suns. But he's 36 years old, and this could have been his best opportunity to get it. But I think for reasons much more than any shortcomings Chris had, he wasn't able to get that done and experience playoff heartbreak once again.
What needs could the Suns address this offseason to get better for next year?
I think a lot of it is just keeping what you have. If Chris Paul opts out of his player option, they can't be penny pinching here. He is one of the primary reasons, or the primary reason, why they got to where they are. So they need to spend for him, even if he's 36 years old. Deal with whatever consequences that lies with down the line. They still have a championship window. You got to keep him to help drive the ship, and also take pressure off of Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton to continue to develop. And then, they have Mikal Bridges, they have DeAndre Ayton eligible for rookie extensions. Those are no brainers. Lock those guys up long term. They're good young talents. And then just continue to develop. I don't think that they really need to make any, major changes. They have the foundation in place. It's a matter of making sure that doesn't splinter off, and then just continue to build on the good habits that they, laid out this season.
Mark Medina, still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Mark, a couple more questions before we finish up. First off, your reaction to Giannis ordering 50 nuggets at ChickFilA was what?
I thought that was hilarious. I mean, I'm sure that there's now an endorsement deal in the works with ChickFilA. That was great publicity. I love the joy when you see guys win a championship and you see them celebrate, whether it's champagne baths or going through ChickFilA drive-through. Like, it's just cool. Like, they're on cloud nine. They're enjoying the moment. They deserve it. It made for a fun viral moment, and I think it just captured not only the obvious of what a championship means to Giannis, but I think it captured his authenticity, that he's a very open guy and he just likes to find kind of the joy in small moments. So why not order a 50-piece McNugget? And look, Giannis takes care of his body, so this is kind of a rare treat, and it's well deserved. But I trust that later on in the offseason he'll go back to his dietary regimen.
Now, this isn't an ad, but what's your go-to meal at Chick-fil-A? Do you eat it?
Yeah, I mean, if they want to pay me, I'll talk them up. But I resist fast food for the most part, because unlike Giannis, like, I'm not, playing 82 game season. I gotta check the LBs. So unless there's a check in the mail, I'm not going to be endorsing other places.
And Mark, before we finish up today, last question: who's your favorite player to cover in the NBA Finals? Who was your favorite one from this past series?
Well, just a peek behind the curtain. My colleague Jeff Silgett, he handled the Bucks end, I handled the Suns end. So, like, I didn't really have too much of an experience to share of what it was like covering the Bucks. So I'll have to just go through the Suns end. I thought it was just really inspiring to hear Monty Williams speak. I mean, he's been through so much in his life. A few years removed from his tragedy with losing his wife in a car accident, but he just has real good life perspective. And when we're talking about the Suns and their ability to get to the finals, a lot of it traces to how not only his coaching acumen, but just how he sets the tone with his personality and his, outlook on life, where, he would always, stress the need to just, embrace the positives out of any circumstances, good or bad, and not get too high or too low. And I think that really taps into the Suns' resiliency this season. The fact that, when you're looking at the regular season, the finals, there are only 2 times that they had a 3-game losing streak. Now, in the Suns' case, that 3-game losing streak the second time came at the worst time in the NBA Finals, but the Bucks are a really good team. So I think especially the fact that they're inexperienced outside of Chris Paul, and it's a pretty young team outside of Chris Paul, they showed a remarkable amount of maturity. And I think a lot of that not just reflects on those guys individually, but Monty setting the tone with how to have the right perspective with, work habits, playing the games, and then just, taking for what it is of what it means, in the big picture.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining me. Great coverage, of course, of the NBA Finals, and get some rest, I guess, before the NBA offseason kicks in. Really appreciate the time.
Well, thanks so much. Easier said than done. It's all about the draft and free agency now, but maybe when that dies down.